Paula Michael here, Grandma Michael. I've had a very blessed life. Struggles, oh yeah, I had struggles. But my grandson, Michael Gallen, is going to help me share some of those events with you that were outstanding in my life. And I do not believe in coincidences. I believe things that happen for a reason. God uses it to guide us with. But I'd like to start with a scripture that's in Isaiah 46. It says, "My child, I took care of you before you were born. I took care of you when you were born. I will take care of you in between from then until you're older and with white hair. I made you, and I will take care of you." And when I say that when God says, "I will take care of you before you were born," the day before I was born, my dad worked for a lumber company, and he went to this hydrant where he always washed off his boots. But at the time, the building was being demolished, and when he was there washing his boots, the brick wall fell on him, and it had rained the day before, so it mashed him down into the mud. He had a concussion and a broken arm. If it hadn't been for the rain, they say he probably would have not survived. So he was taken to the hospital, I think about 30 minutes away, because we was in a little small town. So they go tell my mom, and she's very pregnant with me. So they take her to the same hospital, and she was in hard labor for 24 hours. And when they finally got me where I was going to come out, I was coming feet first. So I would breach, and they were going to have to turn me around, which they did with forceps. And I think probably to that point, maybe it injured my spine some. But then when I was 4 years old, I had a high temperature for about 4 days. And they did whatever you do in those days to take care of a high temperature. When I was 6, and in first grade, I got a tremor in my ring finger, which I still have. And this will mean something later. And then when I was 10, I started having trouble with my right arm. Like if I picked up something heavy, it would give way. So my 4th grade teacher told me to ask my mother what the problem was with my arm being jerky. And she said to tell the teacher. And then when I was a baby, I fell off the bed, and that body. So that was, I had a trembly finger, a jerky arm, but, no big deal. I was skinny and healthy and lived on roller skates, so, what was a couple twitches. So when I got to be, I was in my sophomore year, and kind of at the end of the year, I got to where my head would turn to the side, and then I could hardly turn it back. And it got to be more and more constant. So that was the end of my sophomore year. Beginning of my junior year, it had gotten worse, but I guess I made it till the 2nd semester, but I had back pain and neck pain so bad I had to drop out of school my 2nd semester of my junior year. And there was a doctor there in town that gave medication. They were trying to be able to get me through my junior year before they took me to St. Louis to the hospital. So that's what happened. At the end of my junior year, I was 17, and they took me to St. Louis, to Barnes Hospital, which was a university hospital. And they had no idea what this mysterious paralysis was. First thing they realized that I did not have polio, because it was at the end of polio time. So I had all this research they wanted. Well, I was taking all these, I was just there being examined and stuff. But this was 100 miles away from my home, and my dad couldn't afford to bring me to St. Louis every week. So the neurologist asked me if I why didn't I just go down to the employment office and see if they would hire me, and I could just get a job and just move to St. Louis. So I went to the employment office, and she said, we don't hire 17-year-olds, but we'll give you 3 weeks to see, how it goes. So I was there 3 years until I got married. And I loved the job that I had. So probably I'd been under treatment maybe like 8 or 9 months, and they still hadn't discovered anything that was knocked down to what I had. So in those days, they would give shock treatments lots of times to people that, they didn't know what the problem was. So I was in a psychiatric hospital with these women that had had shock treatment, and they all were kind of like zombies. And they really looked like what you think when you see a movie with zombies. But I was 17 years old. I'd only been to the doctor like 2 or 3 times in my life, and all I knew was that they were trying to help me. So they had me on the table prepping me for this shock treatment. And I almost can't tell this. So the doctor comes in and he says, Paula, we decided not to do this. He said, just go back to your job and we'll just treat you on the outside like we have been. So that's what I did. But if I'd had that shock treatment that day, I wouldn't be sitting here with you guys today. And Lewis's Pam is an investigator for Medicare. And she said and I told her, I said, well, shock treatment today would be different than what it was then. She said, well, it is, except if I get a case across my desk that says shock treatments, she said, they're going to be on disability. So that's the shock treatment story there. So then I, this was back on job, I loved it. So then, probably when I would have been 18 in April, and at the beginning of the year, semester year of that year, it would have been 1956, I guess. Well, there was a seminary in St. Louis, and the guys studying to be pastors, ministers, and one of their requirements was that they had to do a semester of field work in a hospital. So at that beginning of that semester, we got one of the seminary students to do field work in our department, and it was Paula Michael. And how did you think? But we're in a huge hospital, like KU. And heaven only knows how many departments there are. And so Gail and Michael gets assigned to my department. And he's a seminary student. He's going to be a minister. And when I was in 2nd grade, I decided I was to be a music teacher, missionary. So we had a few things to talk about. I worked evening, day shift. He worked evening shift. And one of my last things I had to do on my job was go to the warehouse and get all the supplies, like saline and all this medical stuff that he's going to use the next day. So he worked evening shifts, I worked day shifts, so they would say, well, Gail, why don't you go help her, because he was just there to do whatever they needed to be done. So we had time to talk. So anyway, then it wasn't too long, he decided to ask me out, and a boyfriend was about the farthest thing from there were nice med students and all kinds of, guys, but a boyfriend was the last thing in my mind, because I was trying to get rid of the mysterious paralysis. So he calls me, asks if we'd like to go out on a date. And at work, they called him Mike. And he said, this is Galen. Well, I knew on the roster that he was Galen, but when he called me, I was kind of in shock, you know, so. So I said, well, yeah. So the first day we went on was bowling. I had never seen him. I had seen bowling ball, but that's about all. So we had a good time. And then later, when we, after we were married, he told me that he had taken 3 weeks to decide whether to ask me out or not. Because if he asked me out and took me on a date, he'd marry me. But I didn't know that. So anyway, he was a bleached blonde bodybuilder from California with the t-shirt sleeves. Really cute. But anyway, he was really frustrated with this medical people, the stuff they were doing to try to help me. So, you know, at barbell, weightlifter, barbells is just about the answer to everything. So one evening he came and he had a duffel bag and it was full of, what do you call them, dumbbells, the ones that go on the little pipes, and a duffel bag full of dumbbells. And I lived, at the time I lived in a high rise run by the Salvation Army. It's all women and college age girls, working girls. And I didn't want any of them to know what was in that duffel bag. And also we had elevator operators at the time. And so he set the duffel bag down in front of the elevator and told me good night and he was gone. So when the elevator came down, I took hold of the strap on the duffel bag and it went as far as it would go, just stretched to death, and I could not even pick it up off the floor. So the elevator operator, she gets out and helps me set it on the elevator, which I was still wishing everybody didn't know. But when you set down a duffel bag full of dumbbells that are iron on an elevator, 10th floor knows that something hit the elevator too. So we get to, I was on 4th floor. We get to 4th floor, and she gets out of the elevator, and we drag it down the hall to my room. And from then on, I'm the weightlifting lady of the 50s. And I tried. I tried to do the best I could. But anyway, he was trying to help me, you know. And Galen reminded me the other day that Galen, the definition for Galen is healer. So as far as I'm concerned, he was handpicked for me because that's exactly what I needed. So after, at the end of that semester, he went back to California to work for the summer because he worked in the oil fields and made big money to save for college. So he was gone that whole summer. But before he left, he gave me his class ring. And in those days, if you wore the guy's class ring, which had about a pound of adhesive tape on the other side, but you were his. Yeah. So when he got back, then he asked me to marry him. That's when school started again. And then we went and he got me this ring. And after I got the ring, I got a laundry basket with starched white shirts in it to iron. Because he didn't need to pay for ironing, have somebody iron his shirts anymore after he spent money on an engagement ring. So that was the beginning of my taking care of the Michael white shirts. So then we got married July 8, 1957, and left immediately for Schenectady, New York, where he was a vicar in a church there. So that was interesting. Never, traveled that much. And Schenectady was a real interesting place. It had, you could go to a different lake every weekend around in New York, just for the weekend, and big clear lakes. So it was beautiful. But we were there until October. We left Schenectady in October and came back to Missouri, where he continued his ministerial studies in Springfield, Missouri. So now it's 1958, and we've been married almost a year, because we got married in June of 57. And in May of 58, we had a life that led up to our life, named Gayla Denise Michael. And at the time, I had all this physical stuff. I was pregnant, and I wasn't working. Gail was in college working, and we were really struggling financially. But she was just like a bubble. It's like, you know how babies are. Like, you don't care or it kept us glued together with that baby. So this baby, and and we called her Denise, because otherwise she was Gayla and Galen, and I was Paul and my dad. I was Paula and my dad was Paul. And I thought, we're not going to have that. Every time my mom calls somebody, two went running, so we're just going to call her Denise. So, about junior high, she decided to be Gayla instead of Denise. So we knew the old friends from the new friends, like whatever they called her. So anyway, and then after that, we moved to Kansas City, and we had always hoped that we'd have a child closer, close together. So in 1960, Louis was born. So then we had our little crew. We had boy and girl. And so in 1960, we were in Kansas City, but we moved, just trying to think, we moved to Ruskin Heights is actually where we were when Louis was born. And Galen was teaching in school, and I didn't go to work away from home until the kids went to school. So in when Louis was 6, I started a new job with the Social Security downtown, and in October and February, Louis was hit by a car, and he was in ICU for 3 days. We lived, Gail and I stayed at the hospital, slept and ate, slept on benches for 3 days and 3 nights. So he had lost a spleen, a kidney, and his leg was broken way high, close to his hip, and they couldn't set the leg because it was so close to his kidney where they removed it. So the bone actually overlapped a little bit. So I believe he was in the hospital like 6 weeks in a full body cast. And when we left the hospital, he had a limp. And so, of course, and we asked what the prognosis was. Well, the doctor said they had no idea what was going to happen to Louis. No spleen and one kidney and, a limp. So we took Louis to a prayer service and had him prayed for. And then I don't know if we still already had that bicycle. He had one of those big 3-wheel tricycles. And he rode that. His leg had gotten real skinny from being in that cast for so long. And so he would ride that tricycle till he just, sweat just poured off of him. But with exercise and he's never had a limp that anybody would ever know about. And he's been blessed with life because he's 64 years old. And a lot of people never thought you could make it that long without a spleen. But, he's taking care of his health, done what he's supposed to do. But he's been, a healthy person. So we had 2 wonderful children that were just really a real blessing. And then after, I was trying to think, after that, shut it off for a minute, okay.